Amanda, Canada pledged originally to accept 40,000 refugees from Afghanistan. How are we doing on that number, and why might that number not be reflective of the actual situation for Afghan immigrants and refugees?
I'm really glad that you asked that question. Canada has pledged to bring through 40,000 Afghans. This is broken down between the Special Immigration Measures Program for Afghans who assisted the Government of Canada. Currently, there's 9,510 people that have been successful under that program. There's an additional 15,340 under the humanitarian response, and there's 1,050 that have come through for the pathway for extended family members of former interpreters. So this is a pathway that is very similar to help the family members, as Dave had been expressing earlier, because the family members do also serve as well, and it's very important to make sure they're safe in this process.
Rokhsar, for the people who have already arrived in Canada, what can you tell me about what the resettlement process in Canada has been like? Do you have any stories from people who have made it here and what life has been like for them once they arrived?
That's a good question. Well, as I mentioned before, it was more easier for my family and I since we were the first ones. However, we were basically we made it easier for others because we were sponsoring them to come here, and we basically filled them in with the language barrier, the cultural barriers that were that basically, I'm so sorry, that was difficult for them. So although it was a shock for us, we definitely made it easier for the other ones that came along.
And Dave, we've talked about the different programs, the 40,000 number. What's your view on that number and on the programs themselves? Do they need to be changed, expanded? Is 40,000 the right number, given how much the situation has shifted in Afghanistan since that original pledge was made?
Well, one thing I've come to learn is that the government likes nice round numbers for whatever reason. I don't know how they came up with 40,000, I'll be honest, but there is a need. Whether it's 40,000, whether it's 35,000, 60,000, I think the number is irrelevant. I think if we do a change, I don't quite see why there would need to be, because if the program is already in place, why not just see this one through and then just have a framework in place for anybody else that pops up in the system? Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case, and there doesn't seem to be a will from our federal government to even fulfill the 40,000 that they initially set out to engage with. So I don't know where this leads, but ultimately it's not leading anywhere right now.
Amanda, anything you want to add there? Yeah.
Absolutely. I do apologize. One of the really important things to really pay attention to here is with these three separate programs, the only programs you can apply to are the Special Immigration Measures Program for Afghans who assisted the Government of Canada and the Pathway for the Extended Family Members. You cannot even apply to the humanitarian program, and that is the aspect of this framework here that is getting the most response. So there are 15,300 people that have come through under this program. This is important and this is good. What this represents is Afghans that have already gone to third countries in years previous and have applied through the Canadian framework to get help as a convention refugee. Currently, Afghans that are actually trying to get that designation through the UNHCR are not being successful. So what that does is it limits the people that could even use the the humanitarian program. So one of the things that many organizations have asked for is a response that is similar to what they have done with Syrians, in that they have removed the requirement for them to get that designation. They treat them all as prima facie refugees.
And why do you think the political will is lacking for that change to happen, Amanda?
That's a really good question. And if you take
Oh, I think Amanda's frozen. Dave, do you want to jump in? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I always ask the question, qui bono? Who's benefiting here from the lack of action? I don't quite have the answer, but I think that's the question we need to start asking ourselves, simply because there's been no action over the last year and a half. And it doesn't make any sense, because it seems like a political slam dunk to bring over refugees that have served our country. Their families have been basically servants to the country by providing their sons and daughters to help us out. So to have them over here during a time where we need workers, we need individuals that are going to contribute to the country,
Absolutely.
it doesn't make sense to not allow them in.